In a universe not so far away, the whole world was throwing a massive party to celebrate kicking out the baddest villain around. People were swarming in from everywhere to cheer on the hero who finally took down the big bad demon king, bringing peace to the land. No more monster trouble, no more innocent folks getting caught in the crossfire. After centuries of chaos, this fantasy realm of isekai was finally chilling out in an era of peace. In a narrow alley, two kids dashed toward the hero's victory celebration. The boy nudged his sister, urging her to hurry before they missed anything. It was a once-in-a-lifetime chance they couldn't afford to miss. As they raced forward, the boy suddenly halted, frozen in place by a mysterious figure cloaked in darkness. His sister caught up, puzzled by her brother's sudden stillness, and followed his gaze to the enigmatic robed figure. She couldn't figure out why the man was walking in the opposite direction of the hero's parade, and her brother, fearing they might draw unwanted attention, nervously told her to look away. The boy recognized the figure as a dark magician, a sinister type of mage who dabbled in dark powers. His sister didn't grasp the seriousness of it, but her brother explained that being a dark magician meant being cursed. The man in dark robes, carrying a white sack on his shoulder, walked a lonely road towards the cathedral, where the saint of this era awaited him. She was gazing out, thinking about the peace that had finally come to the world, when she heard a knock on the door. Turning, she saw the robed figure standing at the entrance. Her golden hair symbolized her divine powers, and her white robe signified her purity. She looked at the man and welcomed him back. In stark contrast, his dark clothes and silent presence exuded nothing but sinister vibes. If the saint was a being of pure light, the robed man was the incarnation of darkness. His name is Menen, and when he unpacks the sack, revealing the head of the Demon King, it becomes clear that he was the true hero all along. Due to the dark nature of his powers, he had to remain in the shadows while a useless man in fancy armor took all the glory. The saint, speaking on behalf of the Empire, begins to thank the dark magician, but he cuts her off. Menen declares that he did everything that was asked of him, and now wants the saint to fulfill her end of the promise. With a grim expression, the saint assures him that she remembers her promise and will fulfill it. She then suggests that, given the circumstances, she should refer to the dark magician not as Menen but as Minjun, his original name before he was forcefully summoned to this world. Standing under the statue of the goddess, the saint tries to have a heart-to-heart discussion with the protagonist. She tells him that she's sorry he had to bear such a heavy responsibility and explains that she didn't give him such a job because she hated him. In fact, she will forever be in his debt, but the man replies coldly that he hates her so much he could die right now. Unfazed, the saint promises to do everything in her power to change people's opinions about dark mages in this world. She begs him to reconsider his wish to go back to his old world. But Minjun, firm in his resolve, replies that there is nothing to consider. He has already been used enough, and now he simply wishes to return to his world in one piece. She sighs and says that if he stays for the sake of the Empire, she promises he will be rewarded for all the ill treatment he has endured and more. But it seems she's too late. The dark magician tells her to stop acting. The saint protests, insisting she's sincere, but the protagonist replies that there's nothing she can give him. The saint's eyes widen in surprise. As the god's chosen, she holds considerable power, so what could he possibly desire that she cannot provide? He responds that he was brought here by force, used like a slave, and now she wants him to stay behind to serve her even more. He asks if this is really what she thinks he deserves in return for forsaking his own life. She responds that she can grant whatever he desires because, without him, the Empire's peace might not last long. But the protagonist insists on his first wish. He wants to eat Korean fried chicken. The saint looks puzzled, not knowing what it is. He asks for kimchi, but again, the saint is clueless. He complains about the disgusting food in this world, how he's been eating nothing but high-calorie biscuits all these years. How can he be expected to stay in a world where he's forced to eat such trash? If he can't be provided with good food, can the saint at least get him a gaming PC and a good internet connection? Of course, none of that is possible in this underdeveloped world. The saint clenches her fists, realizing she can't provide any of the things he longs for. She gives up on keeping him in this world, acknowledging that he never belonged here in the first place. She drops her head in defeat and agrees to start the return ceremony immediately. She leads him to the summoning chamber, where the protagonist reminisces about his past, remembering when he was first summoned and feeling relieved that he will never have to see this place again. The saint tells him to stand in the summoning circle in the center and begins the return ceremony. Magical patterns start moving under his feet. She informs him that she will begin by removing the protection of the saint from his body. Minjun takes off his glove and looks at the hand with the saint's symbol on it. Even though it's called protection, it's just a leash that prevents the summoned person from fighting the saint. He's glad to finally be rid of it. The saint holds out her hands, and a radiant light purifies the symbol from his hand. She seems perplexed, not only because the Dark Magician is giving up all the incredible power he built up over the years, but also because he's refusing to take all the riches and fame he would receive by staying here. But the man, fed up with this world, asks the saint to mind her own business. Instead, he asks why she isn't concerned about this situation. Once the symbol is completely gone, he could kill her if he wanted to. The woman replies that she knows she is the root cause of all the hatred in his heart. If he were to kill her, she would gladly accept her death. Now that the protection is undone, she tells him he can kill her if he wishes. If he has no such desire, she would like to proceed to the next stage of the ceremony. The next step involves removing the powers the protagonist has obtained in the world of Isgard. The saint steps back from the circle to complete this process, but this is where things won't go as she planned. Instead, it goes according to the Dark Magician's plan. He quickly hurls a rope of binding dark energy to subdue the saint and hold her up in the air. She tells him that possessing the powers of this world will kill him if he uses the dimensional gate, warning him that what he's doing is complete nonsense. But this man worked himself to death to obtain these powers, and there's no way he will leave them behind. Dropping the saint unceremoniously on her rear, he proceeds to open the dimensional gate himself. Though her life was spared, the saint is more concerned that the Dark Magician will never be able to open the dimensional gate with his unholy powers and will probably die as a result. However, her worries prove unwarranted as the protagonist stands before a fully functioning portal. Despite this, the saint warns him that he's risking his life by attempting to travel between dimensions so rashly. He acknowledges the risk, explaining that he practiced his magic thousands of times to perfect it. He's confused why the people of this world divide magic into light and darkness in the first place. When he reached the peak, he realized all magic is the same anyway. Before stepping through the portal, he puts his hand in his pocket and says there's something he'd like to give the saint before he leaves. She looks on, curious and wary, but it's just a fist, which he tells her to shove up her ass. With that parting shot, he steps into the portal, knowing he will never have to see this stupid world ever again. She shouts for the protagonist to stop before the portal destabilizes and kills the caster, but it's already too late. The summoning chamber is soon filled with waves of bright purple energy. The portal collapses in on itself and vanishes into thin air, leaving the saint alone in the chamber. She slams her fist on the floor in anger. Despite their differences, she's upset that things ended this way. She never wanted to make anyone suffer and never enjoyed putting the protagonist through all that hardship. But now, none of that matters, as the two of them are worlds apart. In an unassuming building on Earth, purple lightning sparks, and Minjun is teleported inside. Finally, he's back on the planet he was taken from. Though he acted confidently, he felt like he was going to die during the dimensional travel, but now, it's all over. He stands in the same room he was summoned from and sees his phone still charging on the table. The sensation of having his phone in his hand is indescribable, and he realizes how much he missed it. His favorite game, Dungeon Power Fighter, is still installed. When he opens the game, the reality of his successful return to Earth kicks in, and he can't help but laugh maniacally. He's finally home. But it's too soon to be happy. For some reason, there's no internet connectivity in his apartment, and outside, a squad of soldiers is hugging the walls as if they're in a war zone. The unit commander asks if they're headed in the right direction, and the scout confirms they are on the path relayed by the radio location. The commander asks his corporal why regular soldiers like them were dispatched to deal with something so dangerous. The corporal is just as confused, saying such questions should be directed to headquarters. With no other choice, the soldiers take a deep breath and prepare for battle. On the corporal's signal, they rush to the road and turn the corner to engage the enemy. But what they see is completely different from what they expected. Kim is walking the streets, annoyed that his phone has no network connection and that not a single store is open, despite it being the middle of the day. The soldiers are confused to see a civilian in a restricted area and shout for the young men to come back to them. Minjun is also surprised to see armed soldiers. He wonders what the army is doing in a civilian area and assumes they're conducting training drills, apologizing for getting in the way. That's when the soldiers notice something behind him and shout for him to run away as fast as he can. When he turns around to see what has the soldiers so flustered, he couldn't be more confused by the bizarre sight before him. A huge wolf-like monster is leaping at him, ready to rip him apart with its claws. But Minjun isn't surprised by the monster. He's surprised that something so weak-looking could have the soldiers so scared. After all, he just came from a world where he fought much stronger monsters for years. When he clenches his fist to summon his dark powers, the demonic energy fails to manifest. It's completely gone. Not that it really matters in this case, since Minjun is able to crush such small fry with his sheer strength. He has no trouble burying the wolf monster's face in the ground. The soldiers stand in awe, realizing they've underestimated the civilian in their midst. The soldiers are stunned silently by this superhuman display of power, and the monster's teeth break off completely from the force of the impact. The fact that it dared to attack him still pisses Minjun off, and he brutally crushed the monster's skull with his bare hands. Even though he can't use his dark magic due to a lack of demon energy, he's still strong enough to handle such monsters. After all, he went through hellish strength training every day in Isgard. He recognizes the creature's identity but wonders why it has appeared in this world. With many questions swirling in his mind, he turns to the soldiers behind him, who might have some answers. But when he calls for their attention, the soldiers are so scared that they can barely speak. After some time, the soldiers take the protagonist into an army vehicle to escort him out of the restricted area. The corporal warns him that he was wandering too far into a monster-infested area. Under normal circumstances, he could have been arrested, but since the commander told them not to escalate the situation, they're just letting him go. How is it possible that you really don't know about anything that's happening in the world? The corporal asks, his voice tinged with suspicion. Minjun simply lies, saying he had been living abroad. Regardless, this isn't the Korea he used to know. He recalls that the phenomenon of dungeons appeared when he was around 7 years old, when monsters from dungeons started appearing in real life. He remembers the soldiers and the military beating them up, much like now. With the appearance of dungeons, superhumans called the Awakened started appearing, possessing abilities that surpassed average humans. They joined the Hunter Corps, which was newly established at the military base, and completely wiped out the monsters as soon as they appeared. Prior to being summoned by the Saint, Korea had no danger of being harmed in civilian areas. But now, there's an even bigger problem due to the current chaotic state of the world. Is it possible that the Dungeon Power Fighters servers are completely gone? If that happened, then Minjun wonders what the point of coming back to Earth was in the first place. The corporal can't help but be suspicious of Minjun's behavior. The world is in a state of chaos, so how is it possible that he doesn't know about anything simply because he was living abroad? But then again, he doesn't have the guts to ask questions that don't concern him. He already witnessed the protagonist's strength firsthand. Kim Minjun calls for the corporal's attention and asks, did people evacuate safely during the crisis, especially people like game developers? Is it possible to get a job in this day and age, especially in a game company? What about the destruction of buildings? Are places like the server storage systems okay? It looks like his needle is stuck on the game, and he needs some answers. The corporal sighs and replies, all right, I'll explain everything from the start. The Corporal explains that the situation deteriorated because of a weird phenomenon that started spreading from the dungeons 2 years ago. One day, the dungeons began to appear much more frequently and started getting larger. The biggest problem, however, was the increasing number of giant monsters emerging from these strange dungeons. Because of that, the military couldn't control the dungeons anymore, and the situation escalated to the point of locking down some civilian areas. Since then, the military has been trying different methods to fight back but lacks the necessary numbers. Minjun is extremely disappointed to hear this explanation. He doesn't care about such matters. The only thing he wants to know is whether the game companies are doing all right because he wants to play Dungeon Power Fighter. The Corporal, noticing Minjun's lack of concern for the world situation, asks him how old he is. Minjun replies that he's probably 21 this year. The Corporal suggests that he should enlist in the military soon, considering that half of his 20s are about to evaporate into thin air. Minjun doesn't understand. The mandatory military service used to be 5 years for the Hunter Corps and 3 years for regular troops. So, why would he need to waste half of his 20s? The Corporal explains that since the situation has worsened in recent years, all troops now serve for 5 years, not just the Hunter Corps. If Minjun is 21, he probably has his enlistment letter ready. Minjun is disappointed. He came back so he could live the rest of his life in easy mode and play his favorite games, but now he has to serve in the military for 5 years, and he's furious that he didn't even get to connect with the game servers yet. That's when his phone finally receives some network, and he gets a message from the military, an enlistment date notice to join the X Division, and the enlistment date is tomorrow. The timing couldn't be more uncanny, so Minjun assumes this is probably some spam message, but the Corporal assures him that it's real and not spam. Minjun is shocked. How can the military enlist people without even a physical examination? And how does it make sense to notify you only 1 day before enlisting? The Corporal explains that the military is extremely short on manpower, and such practices have become very normal. He suggests Minjun go to the internet cafe close to the evacuation center and double-check his status himself. The mention of the PC cafe fills Minjun with new life. When his parents went missing, he just holed himself up in his house and played games, but then he was summoned to Isgard when he was in grade 12 without even a single friend. After years of hell, he gets to experience the forgotten paradise of humanity, an internet cafe where the servers of his favorite games still live, and he can play to his heart's content. As he wastes away hours in this haven, he keeps ordering all the fast food he missed eating in his previous world. Even the waitress is shocked by how much he can eat. Now that his need to play games has been satisfied, reality starts hitting him. He checks the internet news articles, and everything the Corporal said was true, including the enlistment date. The text message had said the due date was tomorrow. If he had possessed all of his powers from Isgard, he would have been able to clear every single dungeon by himself. But for some reason, his body is completely depleted of the demon energy that is the main source of his dark magic. Despite this, he is confident that he can still clear all the dungeons by himself. After thinking about it for a few minutes, he shouts out loud with newfound resolve, "If it means saving my favorite games from getting wiped out, then bring it on." Minjun is resolved to handle everything on his own. The next day, he arrives at the enlistment center as instructed and is surprised to see a large crowd. Some are saying farewell to their families, and others to their lovers, all with somber expressions. Minjun finds this amusing and can't help but chuckle at their misery. The announcer calls for all soldiers to report to the auditorium immediately. It is unlikely that Minjun's military training will be as intense as what he went through in Isgard. Commanders are screaming and swearing at the new recruits to stand up straight and show discipline while putting F-bombs in every sentence inside the auditorium. This harsh treatment even before training begins shocks the recruits, but Minjun is unfazed, considering these insignificant insults ridiculous in comparison to his Asgardian Spartan teachers. The Battalion Commander steps to the podium and calls for everyone's attention. He asks the new recruits to raise their hands if they want to apply to the Hunter Corps and haven't had the chance yet. He incentivizes the recruits by mentioning the Hunter Corps receives better treatment and a much higher base pay. Despite this, No one raises their hand, intimidated by the idea of tougher training. The commander informs the recruits that this is just a formality and there's no need to be nervous. However, one person does raise his hand, Minjun. The commander asks the volunteer to step forward immediately. Eager to make an impression, Minjun pushes against the ground with such force that the floor cracks. He jumps high into the air, flying well above everyone's heads, and lands majestically on top of the podium. The battalion commander is stunned, looking at him with immense surprise. Minjun introduces himself confidently. "I'm Recruit Minjun, and I'd like to apply to the Hunter Corps." The entire auditorium falls silent, all eyes on this extraordinary recruit who just made an entrance like no other. The story continues in the northern regions of Isgard. Picture this, the dark and desolate mountainous area, full of rocky cliffs and lifeless dust. It's a place so empty, even tumbleweeds get lonely. This forsaken land is known as the Forgotten Canyon. Inside a deep, dark cave, a shining beacon of light appears. We hear a voice, our protagonist, Minjun, muttering about his Dark Mage job. Spoiler alert, he's not thrilled. "This Dark Mage gig is endless turmoil," he says, sitting atop a giant, lifeless spider's head like it's a comfy beanbag chair. "Yeah, it's that kind of story." Kim goes on a little rant. "Even with insane skills, if we run out of demonic energy, it's all for nothing." And he's right. Dark mages rely heavily on demonic energy, which is their version of mana. But unlike regular mages, it doesn't just restore itself. Nope, for dark mages, it's a constant grind. He thinks about the White Wizard. You know the type, always calm, always full of mana, probably drinks herbal tea. The White Wizard's motto is "Mana is always within you. Just call it, select it, and collect it." But dark mages, no such luck. To replenish their demonic energy, they have to kill monsters and drain them. Not exactly a sustainable lifestyle choice. Our hero is coming to some tough realizations. His dark mage image means he'll never find any party members. It's a solo act, folks, and if he runs out of demonic energy in a dungeon, well, let's just say it won't be a happy ending. But wait, why is he smiling and in such a good mood? Sitting by a bonfire, he asks the big question: what's the best method for a dark mage to restore and retain demonic energy? As Minjun sits atop one of the 50 giant, lifeless spiders he's slain, green goo and gaping holes now decorating the cave floor, he hears a menacing thump behind him. Turning cautiously, he spots the Forgotten Canyon hidden dungeon boss, Arachnus, a colossal spider with red, bulbous eyes and razor-sharp claws, glaring at him. Kim tries to chat up the beast, but Arachnus isn't in the mood for small talk. With a deafening roar, it lunges at him. But Kim, confident as ever, swiftly pierces through its thick skin and beheads it in a single, calculated strike. Having answered his earlier question about demonic energy restoration, Kim reflects on his recent triumph over the Spider Queen and her brood. Cut to the present, where Kim and June enjoy a quiet moment, sipping coffee in a familiar setting. A voice interrupts. "Your name is Minjun." Kim nods, surprised by the military uniform. The officer informs him that a Hunter Corps team is on its way. Grateful for the coffee brewed by the battalion commander himself, Kim settles in as they exchange banter. "Why join the Hunter Corps?" asks the officer, curious about Kim's motives amid turbulent times. Kim's response: "Business in the dungeons," draws laughter. The officer, charmed by Kim's wit, jokes about forgiving Kim's previous mishap with the auditorium flooring. Here, we learn that in Korea, dungeons are managed by the Army's elite Hunter Corps. Kim seeks entry to challenge dungeons solo, hoping to regain his powers. His ambitious plan includes advancing through ranks, clearing dungeons, and becoming a revered hero. Sergeant Lucino enters, saluting sharply. Intrigued by Kim's rumored hunter abilities, he queries if Kim can open a status window, an ability that could change everything. As Sergeant Lucino awaits Minjun's response, the future hangs in the balance. Will Kim's skills open doors to a new chapter in the Hunter Corps? Stay tuned to find out as Kim navigates dungeons, battles monsters, and strives to become a legend in his own right. Subscribe for more adventures, and don't forget to like and comment below on what you'd like to see next. Until then, keep your swords sharp and your mana flowing. See you in the next quest.